All right, back on June 7th, 2024, I wrote a blog post entitled One Step at a Time. And what I was talking about was this idea that's been running through my head that maybe getting in good physical shape isn't as hard as we think it is. And maybe it's really about, and maybe people's apprehension or the difficulty that many of us have, to include myself, is the idea that when we're trying to make health transformations, we what we struggle with is taking a long-term perspective. And this is something that's been said a bunch. You need to treat it like a lifelong journey, because the the thing that happens is if you make small incremental steps. Look, gradual change is sustainable change. So if we make small incremental steps in our exercise habits, our dietary habits, our overall lifestyle habits, they are more likely to stick. Now, it may take some time, but my argument is if if we go slower in the short term, we'll go faster in the long term. So what I mean by that is if we take a smaller step that's more sustainable for a longer period of time, that big change that we want will happen in the macro faster, versus if we try to go too far too soon, then we end up failing and we keep going through this cycle of failure that makes things feel impossible. So what really may have only taken, let's say, 2 or 3 years ends up taking 10 years because we lack the patience to just go slow. And instead of, like I said, instead of it taking 2, 3 years, it takes 10 because we spend 8 years going way too hard, too fast. We get on some extreme exercise program or some extreme diet that we can't sustain. Remember, gradual change is sustainable change. We get on some pathway that we can't sustain. We burn out and we crash and we yo-yo back on the diet. We go sedentary again, or whatever the case may be, man. But like, I think about this whole idea of maybe getting in good shape isn't as hard as we think it is, because I've been looking at a couple things happening, or a couple situations with coworkers that, I'm a security guard. I work with a lot of older guys. I'm in my early 40s. I work with a lot of guys in their late 50s, 60s. And, I have one particular coworker who's, I think he's 62 or 63 now. He was starting to have, his knee was starting to catch when he was walking around. So the doctor said he's bone on bone, so he doesn't have any cartilage left in his knee. And every now and again, this is like a couple years ago, when we started having this conversation, every now and again, he'd be walking around, his knee, he describes it as his knee catching, and then he'd feel a sharp pain up and down his leg. And his physical therapist that he was working with at the time basically prescribed him this big, bulky knee brace and told him, hey, I need you to avoid deep knee bending and avoid stairs. And to clarify with my coworker, when he was telling me this, I was like, well, does he mean like avoid it temporarily while we do some work to get you back to functioning well? Or does he mean avoid it forever? And the physical therapist meant avoid it forever. And, you know, kind of in a side note in the article I wrote this, but, credentialing, whether somebody's a physical therapist, a doctor, or whatever, or doesn't have any of those things, like myself, I don't have any of those credentials. What I've learned over time, because being a medic, I was a medic in the Army. I've worked with a lot of physical therapists. I've worked with a lot of doctors, and healthcare professionals, chiropractors, etc., either learning from them or working side by side. When I was in a gym environment, I used to work side by side a physical therapist who we would work with clients together sometimes. And what I've learned over time is different clinicians have different perspectives. So you're not getting like the blanket answer that you would get from every. My coworker isn't getting the blanket answer he would get from every physical therapist that he would go to. This is why you should have. This is why they talk about having a second opinion on stuff, right? Because there's still subjectivity. In particular with the human body, like we're still trying to understand how a lot of things work. And the reason I say all that is because when he told me that his physical therapist was like, avoid stairs and avoid deep knee bending altogether, my first thought was like, this guy's a security guard. Like Like, what if he has to respond to a situation? What if he has, like, what if somebody's having a medical emergency and he has to run and then kneel over a person who's like, I don't know, having some kind of medical emergency in the facility that we work at? Like, what do you mean, like, avoid deep knee bending? But that's what he was told to do. And so I was like, okay, one of my favorite fitness channels on YouTube is the knees over toes guy, aka, or I say, aka, his name's Ben Patrick, aka the knees over toes guy. And I've been following his protocol now for probably almost 3 years, and it's done wonders for my body. It's got me feeling that, in combination with a lot of the stuff that I've learned just over my time training, has me feeling more athletic at 42 than I've ever felt. So I showed my coworker Ben Patrick's YouTube channel, and we looked at a couple of the exercises, and I showed him some ways to regress the exercises to fit his level, so that he can work through a pain-free range of motion through his knees. That's a big thing that Ben Patrick talks a lot about, is scalability and bringing things down to an appropriate level for wherever the individual is. And so I was doing that with this coworker. And this was, at this point, this has been maybe like a couple years ago now when we first started having this conversation at work. And what I've seen him do regularly, is I'll catch him doing like 2, 3, 4 reps of the exercises that we talked about, just here and there throughout the day. And he's kind of just like sneaking it in throughout his workday. Whereas me, like, I do move like throughout the day while I'm at work. I'm doing some push-ups here, some deep knee bends here, some stretches over there, whatever the case may be as I'm working. It's security. It's not like an intense physical job, but you are up moving around. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of fit little exercises in here and there. But I also have like structured workout time where, like, for an hour I'm working on my legs, or for an hour I'm working on my upper body, and I'm doing, anywhere between, 7 to 12 different exercises in that session. And what I started to think about, because as he's doing these exercises over time, eventually he stops wearing the big bulky knee brace. He only wears like a little small knee sleeve now. And eventually I started seeing him doing, it's called the split squat, but it's basically like a single leg. It's like a very long lunge, and the forward leg goes into a full knee bend. And he's now doing that with assistance, with his off hands. And I'll see him, just at different places in the building, just doing 2, 3 repetitions of that exercise. And he told me about, it must have been about 6 to 8 months ago. He was like, yeah, like, I haven't had a knee catch in quite a long time. I haven't had that sharp knee pain the way I used to have. And my knees are feeling pretty good. And what has got me thinking about a lot is because he's not doing like the hour-long workout like I do. He's not having this like dedicated, or there is intentionality, but it isn't this big thing where he creates a separate space for it. He's in his uniform walking around at work, and every now and again he takes a moment to do a few repetitions. And this is I've tried to get people to think like this so many times over the years, like, just do, especially when it comes to exercise, just do a little more than what you are currently doing, and then be consistent for a long period of time with that approach. And it's almost like people think I'm lying. It's like they think it's impossible. Like, no, there's no way that that's gonna do anything. Like, no, like, it will do something. My coworker is almost totally out of pain, when before his knee would catch and it would almost like shut his whole world down, right? Like, that's progress. And also his physical therapist told him, like, no stairs, no deep knee bending at all, like, for the rest of your life now. And now he is deep knee bending, and he is going up and down stairs without a lot of hiccups right now. And so he's made a significant improvement by just putting in a little bit of effort on a consistent basis for a good long period of time. We're talking about at least a year, and he's still doing it. And so having the lifelong mentality, having the long-term mentality, and being patient, In the Army, we used to say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like being willing to be incremental, because I think people think working out has to be lifting a bunch of heavy stuff or sweating, a gallon of fluid or doing some crazy intense workout. Like I think people always think of fitness being those things. And a lot of what I'm talking about is just move more than you do now. Like if like I don't know how many times I've told my parents, like, look, during a commercial break on TV, just get up out of your chair and walk to the front door and walk back. Just start with that and just commit to doing that every day. You would be surprised at how that adds up over time and how eventually you start saying, you know what, I'm gonna go walk to the end of the driveway. Or you know what, I'm gonna go walk around the block once every hour. Or, whatever the case may be. It could be, there's so many people out there who would benefit so much from hanging from a pull-up bar for 30 to 60 seconds every day. Like shoulder health, spine health, etc. Or sitting in the bottom of a squat for 15 to 30 seconds. And then once you got good at that, you could take it on up to a minute. Again, incremental change, slow, steady, consistent over time can have massive benefits. But we have this thing in our head where, one, we don't believe that. And then two, we believe that we got to do this like more extreme thing to get in shape. And then maybe you do convince yourself to do the extreme thing and you get injured or you burn out on it, or you just realize, man, I don't have time to do that. And then you go right back to being sedentary, where if you'd have just taken a more gradual approach that was more sustainable over the long haul, you'd still be moving by now. And your whatever physical goals you had, you probably would have hit them. But because we go extreme, like we burn out, and then we go in this cycle of like spinning our wheels. And then after a while, change starts to feel impossible because we keep pursuing an approach that's not sustainable. And so, look, man, like it's like trying to explain sight to somebody who was born blind. I got another coworker. At one point had lost 20 pounds because he started getting all the sugar and processed foods out of his diet. And this is something that I had been talking with him about for a long time, similar to the way I've been talking to the other guy about the knee trouble. And this other coworker, I was talking to him about his diet. And he told me once he got the bad stuff out, he started feeling so good, and he didn't realize he would feel so good. And he told me it was like he had gotten used, feeling bad became normal. So it was like feeling good, he had no concept of what he would feel like. It was like, and I told him, yeah, it's like explaining sight to someone who was born blind. And sometimes, and it was interesting because he was saying that, but in that conversation that I had with him about him changing his diet, I realized something for myself. Sometimes I get incredibly frustrated in trying to encourage people to change in a positive way, because the thing that I always think of it like is a lot of the times, whether it be talking to people about getting on a budget so they have less financial stress, changing lifestyle habits so they are physically healthier, or like, trying to spend some time with a hobby that they have because it would just make them a happier human being, whatever the change is. When I'm talking to people about just taking a small step forward, and to watch people never take that small step because they just don't believe it adds up, when that, like, they do add up. Like this is how people, this is like the idea of compounding interest and how people become millionaires from working regular jobs. It's like they save a little bit consistently over long periods of time, and eventually, boom, they're a millionaire, and they were just a school teacher, right? And so what I'm trying to get people to understand this concept, I get frustrated because it's like I'm watching somebody drowned in a pool of shallow water. And it's like I'm on the edge of the water, like I can't get to them. I'm chained up. I can't get to them. All I can do is shout at them. Like, hey, just stand up. You won't drown if you just stand up. Like, it's just a small thing that they have to do to save themselves. But then to watch people drown and not do it, right? They're flailing in the water and they're drowning, and like the lifesaver is right there. All they got to do is grab it. Or they're in shallow water and all they got to do is stand up. And I'm watching them drown, and I can't go in and save them. Like it's your life, right? I can't save you. I can't spend your money for you. I can't exercise for you and it count for your body. You have to do it, right? But with some people, it's so hard to convince them that taking a small step is better than taking no step, right? And it's like trying to explain sight to someone who was born blind. Like I'm telling my parents, my friends, family, like just take some small steps in the right direction. And they're just not having it because they just don't believe that it's possible. And it gets frustrating for me, but what I have to remember is the same thing. Putting out content, articles, having these little conversations with people, I have to just keep on putting out that little message over time and not looking for these big mammoth changes in a day because we had a conversation, but just showing up every day, trying to be a good example of trying to practice what I preach and putting the content out and letting things happen over time, taking that long-term horizon. So look, y'all, even I got to work on it, okay? Whether it be with fitness or with content creation or whatever. But gradual changes are sustainable changes, one step at a time. Think about that in your fitness life or in different parts of your life, because that's probably how any significant change is made. Remember, follow on YouTube or subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, go to travisdaigle.com and subscribe to my blog. All these podcast episodes come from articles that I've written on the blog in the past. And so you'll get the ideas ahead of time if you go ahead and subscribe to the blog. And make sure while you're at my website, check out my book, the Amazon link, Adapt and Overcome, 3 Principles to Master the Most Important Skill in Life, Personal Ownership. Yeah, guys, that's, name of the podcast. The most important skill in life is personal ownership. Remember, personal ownership is taking responsibility for your actions, beliefs, and overall direction in life. We talked about beliefs today. Like, you got to take responsibility for those false beliefs that tell you that taking small steps don't add up, because they do. We'll talk next time.